This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
For those of you who don't listen to the whole podcast till the end, if you want to see a video version of this podcast, consider joining the Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There's other tiers there, but one of the tiers is you get the video version, more rough and tumble, less edited, and you get it before the audio version, before the public one. So yeah, it's exciting. And you get to see Jaime's beautiful face. I want to quickly touch on this weird C-band stuff because, oh my God, what kind of drama. You worked for the airline industry, so I want your perspective because this is my gut feeling. The FCC told the FAA years ago, this is happening at some point, be ready for it. And the FAA was like, la, 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 we don't care. And then the airline industry in general. And then here we are, the carriers are like, okay, we're doing it, we're rolling it out. And now they're all freaking out.
I am sort of confused because these are completely different spectrums. Like they're completely different frequencies, like by the thousands.
I know, but that's the problem here is that some of the planes are using equipment that's not very good at, cutting off the edges of those frequencies, right?
Well,
they're close. If you look at if you zoom back enough, they're close, right? And I think those radios that are in those 777s built in 2099, whenever the first 777s shipped, are probably not very good at, discerning between C-band. And I get that, but you had 10 years to prepare for this, airline industry.
No, but here's the problem. The average lifespan of a plane before it goes into midlife is 20 years.
Yeah, I know.
So you've got United Airlines flying 757s from the 90s.
I know they do. They love their 757s. Everybody loves their 757s.
Like I used to be a flight dispatcher of the 757. I adore that thing. And so for me, it's probably the best plane ever built, which actually ended up being an accident. They had all these airframes from the 727-200 after Eastern went bankrupt, and they had to figure something out with them. But it's one of those things where, yes, they had 10 years, but the problem with aviation is it's a very slow, very well thought out market. And I was not expecting this to be a problem just because of how different like the frequencies are. I'm trying to remember what like the
So the radio altimeters, as far as I know, are butting right against C-band. So 3 gigahertz-ish. And if you look, yes, there's enough space in between. But as I said, if you have a modern radio, there's enough space.
So where is it in the Engadget article that it's the radio altimeter?
It's radio altimeter. Yeah, that's why they're freaking out. It's very critical, right?
Well, of course, it's what controls your ground proximity warning system.
Yeah, I know.
So you know the difference between the altimeter and the radio altimeter.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
The altimeter is ground level, where the radio altimeter
is the radio altimeter. So this actually tells you, yeah. So I get this is critical.
Ground level height.
Like I'm just saying, like if your radio altimeter receivers or transceivers are older, to replace them with ones that can tune these signals and reject the C-band better. This is not rocket science. We've been doing digital radio for a long time, 20, 30 years now. Like, that's why I'm saying the industry had time. I think what's happening is it's a cost thing. The airlines didn't want to spend the money upgrading the planes with those new radio altimeter that are better rejections of the C-band.
No, the problem it's not that simple. The problem is, like, for example, if let's just say that they, like when they implemented TCAS, which is your your traffic control awareness system. So like that's literally what collide. Yeah, exactly. And so the one TCAS has to talk to the other plane. Even then, they've made TCAS a requirement only to either jet engines or planes that are heavier than 12,500 pounds in maximum takeoff weight. And so even then, the ruling doesn't apply to everyone. And so even if they make you, like if they force you to adopt a new one, because like we're going to implement RVSM, and so you need, which is like the fact that you can fly 1,000 feet in separation of the other. Like if you were going to implement RVSM, and so you need a different kind of TCAS, you have years to comply, because if you've got a fleet of 100 757s,
it takes
just do the math. Just do the math.
It's expensive.
Like, how does it benefit the airlines? And so I think that it wasn't just that the FAA was playing dumb. It's just that there is no benefit for these C-band. And like, first of all, who has to be who should have done a better job is what is it? The FTC in not licensing
the FCC
in not licensing a spectrum that can collide. Can you imagine them licensing a spectrum that can collide with anything that has to do with television? You know that's never going to happen.
Right.
You know that's never going to happen. And so
this is America. Remember, this is the land where, the carriers lobby the government and say, we need more spectrum, give us our spectrum. Oh, and the government goes, oh, we could have auctions and get billions of dollars in our coffers to auction out these things. So I think you're right. It's different industries moving at different pace. I just still feel like I'm not putting all the blames on aviation here. I think the FCC and the carriers are definitely guilty too. But I feel like this last minute happening of the last few months of like this back and forth is really, the airline industry kind of like just needs to adapt. Like, I mean, we need radio communications more than we need flying right now. Like, you and I don't agree to that, but
here's the problem: to not have a mid-band 5G is just not having a flavor of the same service. It's not like if people are going to die if they don't have it. You still have LTE. The problem, darling, is literally if you've got interference with your enhanced ground proximity warning system, you can end up in a volcano.
Oh yeah, no, this is a big problem. I am taking it very seriously. I just feel like they should have, by now, 10 years in, worked on together, the FCC, the FAA, to make this. It shouldn't be like this impasse all of a sudden at the last minute.
No, but I think this is the reason why I'm confused. Because, when I started seeing the news, I actually didn't read much into it because I'm like, is this like, it makes no sense, because if you look at the frequencies that are used for radio communication, and for TCAS, and for your transponder, which you need that for your TCAS, and for a lot of these elements, they're sort of like, how do you call it? Like in Spanish, we call it blindado. Like they're sort of bulletproof. Like
right.
It's like there's even enough like cushion
redundancy.
Of spectrum,
I know,
redundancy around them for this not to be a problem. So when I started hearing about it, I'm like, this kind of makes no sense because these frequencies are so separate from each other. If anything, I would have thought that millimeter wave, which behaves more like AM, which is HF on airplanes, like you need an HF transmitter for you to be able to fly across the pond and stuff like that if you're doing extended over water operations. But I'm like, this kind of makes no sense. Like these frequencies are not even close to each other. How could they not tell this? Or how could they not figure this out? Because I'm telling you right now, if it has to be between aviation and C-band, I can tell you right now your C-band is dead. I can tell you
I'm
right now.
I'm not so convinced in this country.
I can tell you right now. Here's the problem. The problem is that, and we can get even more technical and legal about this.
We don't have time.
We don't have time for it. But it's
you and I should have an airplane podcast someday. We out about ETOPS.
We can, darling. The problem is that the United States can't just, because they pretty much invented the Chicago Convention. They can't just back out of it because it involves like every single, like you have to understand that planes in Russia are retrofitted, or planes in the UK or in China are retrofitted compliant to be able to fly to this country. They have radio licenses that allow them, and you actually have to define which of your batch of planes can fly to the US, because you can't apply these modifications to all
everything,
planes.
Yeah.
And so you can't just tell people, oh, we're launching C-band, and so you know what? Half of the planes that are certified to fly into this country legally are no longer capable. Darling, the lawsuits are going to be insane. It doesn't work that way. It's the other way around. Aviation takes priority.
I mean, I think the issue here is that there's no overlap. There's a gap between them. But the biggest problem is older transceivers are not as good at rejecting the potential C-band interference. It's all very potential. There's been some testing done, and so far no problem. But, airline industry, as you know, safety first, obviously. And, they move slowly. And remember how long it took us before they let us use our phones in the planes, and we all knew this wasn't going to be a problem.
Yeah, we all knew that it had nothing to do with it. It was completely different frequencies.
Right. But the point is, it took them a really long time to get around, and I think that's what's happening right now. I think that there is a risk. It is higher than before, because this C-band is close-ish, but they're freaking out about it. They want more buffer. And obviously that's not going to happen because the FCC has allocated, as you said, the fact that they even allocate. Anyway, we could go on. But the point is that I think that's why I'm so kind of like, what is going, like, how can this happen?
Listen, and that's the reason why when I saw the news, I'm like, I'm not even going to cover it on the daily because it kind of makes no sense. But you would have to have a very knowledgeable mind on the industry to understand why.
I put it in there because I'm like, hey, Jaime and I can nerd about airplanes for 5 minutes.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm sure RJ from Race Point is like, oh, here he is. Let's talk planes.
Well, he does listen to the show, so let's see what he says.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.